Okay, I'm going to call the special council meeting to order, and if you will join us for a salute to the flag. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, clerk, call the roll call.
Councilmember Ariano,
Here.
Councilmember Nazrati, Councilmember Larson,
Here.
Councilmember Esquer,
Here.
Mayor Bublak.
Here. I'm sure that council member will be just coming. We had a car problem with one, so I'm certain it could be two. Declaration of conflicts. Anyone seeing and hearing? None. We're going to close session. Mr. White?
Yes, closed session for labor negotiations, Government Code 54957.6. Organizations are the Turlock Associated Police Officers, Turlock City Employees Association, Turlock Firefighters Association, Local 2434, Turlock Management Association, Public Safety, and Unrepresented Employees.
Okay, we'll be back shortly. We're just going to go next door and have a little moment.
Just for the record, the anticipated time to come back out is 2:45 to 3.
We're coming back from our closed session. Who will be reporting out? Mr. White, thank you.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, we met in closed session. Direction was given to staff as it relates to item 1A, and as it relates to item 1B, liability claims 54956.95, claimant Robert Christopher Reynolds against the City of Turlock by a 5-0 vote. The City Council voted to reject that claim. 4-0 vote, voted to reject that claim with one absent.
Thank you. Approval of agenda as posted or amended. I need a motion and a second.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Councilmember Ariano,
Yes.
Councilmember Larson,
Yes.
Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Mayor Bublak.
Yes, it passes 4-0. Thank you. This is public participation is limited to items on this agenda. The 3-minute rule has taken effect on this specific agenda from now until it's changed. So anyone wishing to fill out a blue card or speak? Nobody? Okay. We'll close the public participation and move on to the budget workshop. Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the folks who are attending this meeting and who may be watching it from elsewhere. At our last meeting, I had the opportunity to give a fairly comprehensive presentation regarding the city's current fiscal state. Nothing's changed since then. Our general fund reserves by the end of our unencumbered general fund reserves by the end of fiscal year 2018-19 will be approximately $2.5 million. The city's own mandate for general fund reserve is $6.5 million, and the Government Finance Officers Association recommendation for a city our size would be $7.1 million. We have increasing revenues, but not increasing at a pace sufficient to match the increased costs of doing business. We have a structural deficit here in the city of approximately going into fiscal year 1920 of about $4.1 million. The initial request for budget submissions by departments to advise this office the amount needed to do their job and carry out their functions in a manner that they deem professionally responsible and desirable would have created a $4.4 million deficit. We were tasked with presenting for council consideration a budget that would be balanced for fiscal year 1920, and that we have done. You heard from our you heard at last week's meeting from general government departments. Today, it's public safety that will make their presentations. Public safety represents approximately 75% of the city's general fund budget. Police represent about 50%, and fire represents about 25%. In our general fund budget, we have 123 employees in the police department, including sworn and non-sworn. In the fire department, we have at the present time 57 employees, or I should say 57 positions. That's the case for fire and police. They are positions, so there's 57 positions full-time in fire. And we have 40 positions in general government, general fund. That includes finance and the city manager's office, HR, and the other areas where we support all the other functions of city government. The departments, police and fire, provided me with the information that I used to make recommendations for expenditure reductions and revenue increases. As I've said with respect to the other departments, the decision to submit those was mine alone, and their extent of their participation was to provide me with what I asked for as the least worst alternatives. They're going to look forward to presenting their department's needs, activities, budget, the impact of this budget on their operations. And they'll certainly be happy to take any questions necessary. I will say that with respect to the budgets that have been recommended by the city manager, that our major task over the next year, particularly in the public safety budgets, is to manage those budgets, to manage the use of overtime, to be strategic, to be dynamic, to minimize the impact on the public without losing sight of the fact that in eliminating our budget deficit, the structural budget deficit that was bequeathed to this council from prior years, it is impossible to avoid having an impact on public services. All of these costs in this budget are ongoing costs. And for that reason, as I noted last week, I do not recommend that this city apply non-recurring revenues, that is the $2.5 million remaining in our general fund reserves, toward operating expenses. Once that money's gone, we're going to have the devil's own time getting it back and building our reserves up to either the 6.5 that the council expects or the 7.1 that the financial world expects. Madam Chair, with that, I'm happy to relinquish the floor to council and to our department heads, and I would believe fire will be going first today.
Any questions of city manager before we begin? Okay, then Chief Deloney.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Council. Turlock Fire Department and Neighborhood Services Division make up 25% of the general fund. In our fiscal year 2018-19 amended budget, our revenue was $725,000. Expenses totaled $10,901,788. For a grand total of $10,176,788. Fiscal year 2019-20, revenue proposed budget was $919,400. A $194,400 increase over last year due to the higher revenues from FEMA OES reimbursements, which offset expenses from strike team deployments. We recently received our camp fire reimbursement totaling $117,184. So far this year in 2019, from January to May, we billed AMR a total of $13,666. Expenses increased due to contractual obligations, specifically step raises and PERS cost. Fire presented a status quo budget and decreased supplies and equipment costs. This was done prior to the reduction strategies that I will now be presenting. At the city manager's direction, Fire has identified a total of 6 major budget reductions that will affect our operations. This slide combines the first 2 strategies: hold vacant 2 firefighter positions and reduce overtime budget by $400,000. This strategy produces a total savings of approximately $622,518, but is not without impacts. The Turlock Fire Department daily staffing is 13 firefighters, line firefighters, 1 battalion chief, 3 firefighters per apparatus, at each house. The current total staffing and overtime accomplishes through 48 personnel and $500,000 in overtime. Each additional person reduces overtime by $80,000. To eliminate overtime, almost completely maintain current staffing, we would need a total of 54 positions. Every firefighter reduction below 48 firefighters increases overtime to maintain those staffing needs. Under the proposed budget, the fire department will have 46 line personnel and $100,000 in overtime. 33% of the time, a firehouse will be browned out, just based on vacations, holidays from July 1st to December 31st. Those are planned brownouts. It is anticipated that percentage will rise to 50% due to sick time, comp time, jury duty, and bereavement. Impacts of browning out include slower response times, a greater diligence, reliance on mutual aid, diminished customer service, and staffing levels decrease, and a possible change in our ISO ratings. Brownouts will occur whenever daily staffing falls below 13. This can be done in a few different ways, which I will be vetted out operationally. As chief of the department, I will consider staffing that will provide the best possible coverage with the available resources. As to what firehouse will be browned out for the day, this will be determined by conditions as shift training, city events during the shift, and by taking into account the personnel who are creating the brownout situation. It will be done strategically to minimize the risk to the city. Hold vacant division chief position, chief of departmental training. This strategy produces a total savings of just over $245,000 with salaries and benefits, but also has impacts which include lack of oversight and training, loss of succession planning, EMS compliant reporting. Defund part-time neighborhood services office assistant. This position is currently vacant. The impact of this reduction strategy totals $14,000. Neighborhood services addresses hot-button topics such as homeless issues, city blight, shopping carts, and graffiti. The monthly average on phone calls from January to May were 476. Eliminate transfer of equipment replacement funding for fiscal year 1920. The impact would be deferring purchase of safety equipment. Tools and equipment would be used at or past their recommended useful lifespan. Eliminate transfer for vehicle replacement, 1920. Impacts of this reduction strategies are Turlock Fire Department uses frontline fire engines for 15 years, then 5 years in reserve. Engines 31 and 33, both built in 2006, are nearing the end of their recommended life cycle. They are frequently out of service, and these breakdowns increased our costs, which reduces our budget. At the city manager's direction, the Turlock Fire Department has made an 11.2% reduction from our budget. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Question of the chief?
So I was looking back because I wasn't here last year, and some of the minutes that, in March of last year, I think, when the additional firefighters were hired, are those firefighters are still with the department?
Those additional firefighters were not added, council member. They brought us up to 2000, they're not additional. They brought us up to 2008 staffing levels. They were part of the 15 captains, 15 engineers, and 15 firefighters. We lost 2 firefighters to other departments, and currently we have one that has been offered a job elsewhere. So those 3 positions just,
Was that in there? I didn't see that.
in my presentation,
Yeah.
only if there was a question.
Mr. Linton?
Yeah, I just want to be clear. There was a resolution adopted by council in 2018, and my recollection of it was that it added to the allocation table 3 firefighters, so that there had previously been, 45, and now there were going to be 48. Is that correct?
Right, we're adding 3 to the 12 to make it 15, correct?
Right, so in
But-
2018, the city did add 3 firefighters to the allocation for fire department.
That's correct. To bring
Okay.
us up to the 2008
But that's right, I just want to be. I just want-
standard. Yes, that's correct. It was, somehow we lost those when, in 2008, when everything crashed, before my time here. So to bring those back,
So in 2000, I'm not trying to be.
No, please,
You know,
please.
I just want to understand, because what I was reading on the March, I think it was 27th minutes, is different than what we had in front of us. So 2018, there were 3 firefighters hired in that calendar year for
Correct.
18-19.
there were 7 total, but yes, those 3. There was 3, yes.
So 7 total, and you've lost 3
The
now,
about-
right?
Right, yes. We lost
So we
2
So
now.
actually 4.
We lost,
4 hired
we
that
lost
year.
2 now, and 1 is a potential.
Mr. Lawton, real quick.
I just want to make sure.
I guess I'm.
I want to get us,
My
I
math
just want
is
to make
off.
sure, we're on the same page here. There's a difference between hiring firefighters, i.e. filling vacancies, and creating positions. The number of firefighters who were hired during fiscal year 17-18, that's not the important part for the purposes, I think, of the discussion you're trying to have. The question is, how many positions were added? There were 45, 3 were added, there were 48 as a result of that.
That's
So in
correct.
January, so at the beginning of fiscal year 17-18, there were 45. By the time 17-18 had ended, 3 positions were added by resolution, making it 48. However many got hired, however many vacancies were there, how many people came through, that's important for payroll and bookkeeping, but for the purposes of the discussion I think you're trying to have, the 7, however many were hired, that's not germane to what the point you're trying to make. There were 45. There was a vote by council. Additional funds were appropriated. There were then 48. What is proposed in the recommended budget is
46.
the elimination of 2 vacant firefighter positions, going from 48 to 46 positions, however many are filled at a given time or not. I think
Is that what you're looking for? Well, there you had 2, questions?
And I wasn't here, I wasn't, part of this discussion. In my estimation, at 45, were we browning out stations then?
In 16, 17?
We're not rounding out stations, no. Not
Well,
in
we have-
2017 and 18, no.
But we're beyond that now, and we're having to do that.
So 2016, 17, you had 45. And as of July 1st, you'll have 46. So are you asking if
Yeah,
you're
why are we,
browning out?
and I've been through brownout stations with, Chief
Right, well,
Richards and,
we're
I
reducing the
just-
overtime money. We're reducing the overtime. We fill those vacancies through overtime. So now, initially, normal staffing is 48 at $500,000. Right now, we're at 46, that's $660,000. The proposed budget allocation is $100,000. So there's no money to pay the overtime to fill those vacant spots. So that's going to make us
I
down
do
the
have a
station.
concern with the budget that's put forward, because I did work for the sheriff's department. I completely understand how overtime works, and the functionality of the police department and the fire department is a crisis mode operation. So you can't always predetermine what is gonna happen, right? Fire season, right?
That's
So,
correct.
For us to be in a position sitting up here to make sure that we're being, diligent in our request and to make sure that you guys are funded in the operations that you need. There is going to be a level of overtime that will incur. I think that's a real tight budget on the overtime, but if that's how you think that you can come up with that extra cost savings, then I guess we're gonna have to move forward with it. I just feel like maybe we could work together to find some other strategies instead of browning out stations.
I agree, we can work
I have a
together.
concern, and have many people that are firefighters in my life, and I
Yeah.
have a concern about
Yeah,
this.
And I agree, and thank you, council member, for that. We can work together. Right now, through the end of the year, we have 61 scheduled brownouts. I mean, if everything goes the way it is now, that leaves us 33% of the time. And but that doesn't include any sick time, CTO, workers' comp, injury, bereavement, and that could reach 50% of the time.
So we need to come up with strategies to mitigate that as well.
Yes, ma'am.
So for us to be strategic in our planning, and we don't want to lay anybody off. We don't want to have to cut things. This is not fun for us at all. So, but we need to make sure that we're actually putting a budget forward that we can actually live with. So to me, this is concerning. I've lived through brownout situations, and, I was in the fire department in Salida when we had to do that, and it wasn't fun, but it was something that we needed to do. And maybe we need to come up and strategize with something else that we can do.
I appreciate that, council member. If I just may add, from January 1st to May 15th, we saved 15 individuals. Last time I was here, I talked about the 28, 26 we did last year. This year, we saved 15. 7 in District 1. District 2 had 5 saves. District 3 had 2 saves. And in my home district, where my family lives, in District 4, we saved a person.
I'm not here to argue that you're not
No,
saving
I'm just,
lives. Yeah.
I
I
trying to convey
understand
how-
that's your business and that's
our
your job,
business.
and
And
that,
we're-
what I'm concerned about is the dollars amount that go behind that.
Understood,
So-
understood.
So I thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Other questions, Chief?
I have a question about the browning outs. So the 30%. Could you go back to that slide? Where we talk a little bit about the browning out. I think it's back a couple.
Yep.
Okay. I think it's
Possibly.
okay. So just logistically, like how this is going to look. When we have the 61 scheduled brownouts, are these during specific hours of the day? Are these in the entire shift? Can you go into like kind of just like what that looks like for the public?
Yes, what I expect to do is sit down and exactly see where that needs to be. I will make the decision on what gets browned out, like Saturday night downtown, Station 1, that's not a problem. We're going to keep that staff. Now, will we be worried about the northern section? Sure we will, but we'll have it covered. We're going to do the best we could. What you decide on, we're going to do the best we could, and we're going to make it work. To whatever level it is, that's our commitment. We're going to make it work. We have looked at times where certain districts are busier than other districts, and that's all taken into consideration. I'll make the decision who gets browned out and what.
Okay. So just to follow up, with these scheduled brownouts, this isn't going to, will this shut down an entire station
Yes.
during that brownout period? Yeah.
Yes.
One of the 4 will be totally, and there's no operation coming out of that?
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions? Yes.
Are you able to tell us how that overtime budget would impact the percentage of brownout? So if we did a reduced overtime budget of 300,000, what percent brownout that would look like?
Well, what I can offer is, normal staffing was 48 firefighters, that brought us to $500,000, right? So there's more money to hire overtime. The more it was reduced, and right now we have 46 out of $100,000. If that number was boosted, then the brownout would be less. We wouldn't have to brown out a station as much. There's no money to hire back firefighters at $100,000. That makes us brown out a station.
Mr. Lawton?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
And Chief, I'm sure this will help illuminate the situation. City of Turlock has 4 fire stations, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And on duty at any given time are a battalion chief responsible for all 4 stations, and then within each station, a fire captain, fire engineer, and a firefighter. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that's the 13 individuals who are on during a given shift.
Yes, sir.
Okay. if one firefighter or a fire engineer, for example, is not available for their shift at Fire Station 2, and of the other 7 firefighters who would be available,
Working.
the 46 above, the 7 more than the 39. So then, based on what I'm hearing, Fire Station 2, because of the absence of a firefighter, that would be closed. The other 2 firefighters would be deployed to the other firehouses,
Yes.
as opposed to,
Bordering the vacant firehouse.
as opposed to leaving the remaining firefighters for that crew on duty at Station 2 and dispatching both Station 2 and 1, 3, or 4, whichever's closest, at the same time.
That's correct, sir.
So for the want of a nail, the horse is lost.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's your strategy at this point. Thank you.
So when we did this, we had a series of 4 hours where these, and this is for you guys, a series of hours where the station was vacant.
Correct.
So I assume that's probably what you were trying to accomplish.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So it's not a complete, a blackout is a different
No,
scenario.
we're not going to close the station
Yes.
only for a short period of time.
I want to make sure that the public knows, because, these people have not gone through that before. I have, and I've had that, experience. It's something that we, that a fire district would never want to do. But if this is what makes our budget flow for the next 18 months, so we can figure out some other revenue sources, then that's what we need to do.
So any other questions of the chief? Okay, then I'll open it to the public. Anyone wishing to make a statement?
Thank you.
Thank you, chief. 3 minutes, Mr. Franson.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Some of the presentation I just saw right now, looking at the numbers, it seems like there's a couple things that probably could be looked at. And I know it's been discussed as far as I know, all the way back to even 2005 specifically, which is, we're talking about overtime. And the general terms that have been used with some of us in the public are expected overtime and the emergency overtime. The expected overtime, according to what we've heard, and I think the term or the situations are using, is with personnel known staffing issues, like vacations, holidays, whatever. And that's creating a shift backfill or overtime for those shortages, in quote, shortages of personnel. But their shifts are, I still haven't figured this out. Are they 24 hours or 48-hour shifts for firefighters? I guess you guys can answer this afterwards. But at any rate, shift work has been questioned because there's 24-hour services with police, 24-hour services with the wastewater treatment plant. Firefighters are 24-hour service, but they have 24-hour shifts. So if we know that we're going to have that many shortage of staff members according to the personnel impacts that council has approved, which I don't know if that's required by law or if that's something that this council's decided to prioritize, but that staffing level decided by you, if it's known that we're always going to have a shortfall, we have to address that personnel issue. So people jump to adding more firefighters or that ideal perfect level, but no one's addressing the shifts that create 24 hours or 48 hours of overtime versus if you had a 12-hour shift of overtime. If the one person is going to be gone, why not create a backfill of 12 hours of overtime, not 24 or 48 or whatever? If that's the way it's working, I'd like to have that clarified. And then also, I think that in that regard, I think the whole fire services needs to be reviewed, because I asked a question I haven't got the answer yet, which is what are the impacts of response times going to be? We did hear the percentage of budget by police, which is 50%, fire 25%. I think that what needs to be discussed here, even in the term, I heard this was going to be a public safety workshop. There has to be prioritization. Is there not a 1 and a 2 3, 4, 5. I mean, even in personnel levels or departments, we heard 50% is the police department. So we have to prioritize, and all anyone's hearing is one department, say firefighters or fire services. But if we don't cut them, what are you saying, cut police? I mean, we only have so much money, but everyone else has different structure for personnel except fire. So I'd ask to look at that in the actual numbers for overtime specifically. Thanks.
Chief Delaney, can you speak to the questions that Mr. Franzen asked?
Mayor and Council, day staff works 2,080 hours per year, 40 hours a week. Firefighters work 2,912 hours per week. I was trying to write really fast. 56 hours per week schedule. Each firefighter works 121 shifts a year, 3 shifts divided by 365. Overtime varies. Firefighter that gets the overtime. Each position has a different pay rate. The average may be around $45 to $50 per hour. It's hard to really say. But if you're hiring for a firefighter position, which is different pay rates than an engineer, which is different than a captain, which is different from a battalion chief, it's very hard to give you a kind of a dollar amount. That may be a finance thing. I'm not quite sure, but it's hard to say, okay, this is what it is. That is, they work 56 hours a week, and they work 48 on, 96 off. Very seldom happens that way. Hope that answered the question.
Thank you. Anyone else in public wishing to speak? Wait for anybody from the other room to come. If not, then I will close all public participation. This is not a vote. This was to get us educated and ready for tonight's meeting at 6 o'clock to approve or make alterations to our budget. So any closing comments, Mr. Lutton?
I'd be happy to wait until we get to the end with police.
Fair enough. Okay. Motion for adjournment?
Police?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my gosh. I just hate police so much. I'm sorry. Yeah. Chief, come on up here. Wow. I just fast forwarded.
You know what she drives, right?
A black and white?
That's okay.
You were limping. I didn't want you to get up.
I blend into the furniture, I know.
Right? Gosh.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. I appreciate your time. So before we get started on the PowerPoint, I just wanted to cover a few things, and I appreciate the city's manager's comments in regards to he owns this budget. This is the budget that was presented in totality with input from all the directors. We were asked to make reductions. We were asked to come forth with additional reductions in order to show what a zero or balanced budget would look like. We've already spoken about revenues. We've discussed revenues are not meeting the cost of doing business. I would just like to point out before we even get started, back in 2008, the city was 13.3 square miles. 2018, we were 16.88 square miles. So the city has grown. The revenues are still maintained under your sales tax and your property tax. And I just want to make sure, and I know you folks know, but I want the public to know that the city does not get 100% of your sales tax. The city does not get 100% of your property tax. It's a small percentage that comes in. And while our retail establishments here in the city of Turlock have expanded greatly, the revenues are not meeting what the requirements are for the services that our community demands. And I wanted to make that, I just wanted to point that out. In 2008, we had 78 officers allotted, which is 1.11 per thousand. In 2018, we have 82 allotted to us, budgeted to us. We haven't attained that yet. That comes out to 1.09 per thousand. So the population grows, right? It costs more to do business. Thought it was really important to bring that up so we have a good frame of mind in regards to this. I also want to thank my fellow directors here. We work together in the city to provide services, whether it's police, fire, parks, recs, maintenance, et cetera. We work together. But frankly, today I'm up here to present to you the police department and our 24/7 commitment to the safety of this community. And personal safety, pedestrian safety, motorist safety, and the welfare of our business community. Because when a city cannot maintain its crime rates or continue to lower its crime rates or provide programs from your law enforcement to deal with those and be proactive as much rather than reactive, that is going to impact your businesses. No one wants to come to a city that can't provide for its safety of its customers. And the city of Turlock has done a very good job there, both in police and fire. We've done an outstanding job, and I think all of you know it. So let's get started. You have in front of you numbers, so my PowerPoint's going to be a little bit different. The city manager's provided you with the reductions. So what I wanted to point out is, hopefully it worked, the proposed reductions for the police department in total of all the reduction strategies is $1.889211, $1,889,211. So $889,000. What this does not count is additional funds that we did in a previous strategy that's already included in the budget. So the police department's reductions is over $2 million. Having said that, I want to explain a few things that go with this chart. The difference between programs and events. It needs to be very clear. A program for the police department are those programs which establish education, collaboration, crime reduction, proactive with the purposeful event of ensuring the trust of the community and bringing crime rates down. Events are your 4th of July parade, your fair, your high school parade, the Pentecost parade, the Kettle Dash. Those are all events. And during those events, it's law enforcement's responsibility to provide safety and security for the event, for the pedestrians, for the motorists, and for the bystanders. Two different things. So I wanted you to be aware of that. So when looking at our proposed reductions, we've broken them down, and these are the numbers that you have that match that 1,000,008 number. Moving forward, the $262,388 is a combination of maintenance in regards to vehicle maintenance, building maintenance, that's the elevator, the air conditions, et cetera, vehicles, our police vehicles, marked vehicles, unmarked vehicles, gasoline, oil, et cetera. It comes to about $262,388. Obviously, there's impacts, correlating impacts there for those. We will defer repairs unless it's absolutely necessary and catastrophic, i.e. elevators. We have two. If one goes out, it goes out. We'll use the other one. In regards to vehicle repairs, we'll stay within the budget, and if a vehicle goes down and we can't repair it because of funds, the correlating impact is that vehicle will not be utilized. Hopefully with scheduling, we'll be able to implement either bring in another vehicle that's not being used, whether it's a graveyard vehicle and you have day shift working, use a swing shift vehicle, et cetera, or we may end up doubling up for one police officer, having two police officers in a car. They'll just have to share the reporting district, which will increase the response times because I don't have two officers, one to send here, one to send there. So that's basic revenue miscellaneous. Any questions on that? I mean, it's a given you have there. The next one, vehicle equipment reduction. So our budget, we budget annually certain dollar amount. Initially started around $419,000 several years ago. You have to have a cost inflator attached to that. No cost inflator was ever done. It was brought up, it was never done. The city played catch up several times back in 2008 and 10, 11 and 14. Captain Williams is my numbers guy. So in order to avoid that headache again, we did a cost inflator at this proposed budget, which is where you get that $550,420. We budget every year a certain amount that falls within the replacement of our police vehicles, whether it's 5 years for a marked vehicle, a certain mileage level, or 7 years for unmarked vehicle. And so each year we buy about between 4 and 6 cars. So what we've proposed here is we will not budget that amount this year, and we will deter or defrain any of the purchases for 1 year. That doesn't mean next year we come back with a budget for $1,100,000 we need, right? It just means instead of replacing it 5 years or 7 years, we're going to replace it 6 years and 8 years. Correlating impact, we've done this once before back in 2002, 2001, where we were taking our vehicles up to almost 100,000 miles. We had axles breaking, we had chassis cracking. Wasn't very good. I can't tell you what will happen now. These are newer vehicles, and we found out that the Fords are very expensive to repair. As I think we all know, the newer cars are expensive, especially when you get to the repairs. So that's those two for our reductions. If there's no questions, I'm going to proceed to the next slide.
Questions?
So here's the staff reductions. We're reducing staff by $743,403. There is a huge correlating impact there. And the impact is delay of services. We are going to be redefining how we operate in regards to our records department. And what that comes to is with the records technician moving out, defunding that records position is going to create us issues in regards to our ability to process the police reports. We're moving our swing shift schedule and just making everything day shift. We'll close the front lobby, make it open from 12 to 5 to correlate with the rest of the city. And it'll impact our community members a little bit, but we'll be able to get through that. The bigger impact comes when we're processing police reports, processing requests for Public Records Act, processing district attorney reports, requests for supplemental reports, delays in prosecution. So those will be some issues that will come up, but we're already working on those reductions. I went to the records clerk first. I'll hit the top two here in a second. Background investigations. Our background investigations approximately hit $126,000 for 18-19 estimated. That's because our backgrounds not only conduct background investigation for police officers, dispatchers, but for every single person in the police department building, public safety facility building, because there's Department of Justice standards that we must meet. Nobody can come into that building unless they have a certain level of clearance. Unless they're accompanied or elected officials, we do a little background on you, just so you know, just to make sure you don't have warrants for your arrest. But that is a requirement. And what was that? Warrants? Active warrants. You're giving it up right there, huh? No, just a joke. There's no warrants. Let's clarify that.
Yes, please.
So that's a requirement, but we've also put a lot of hours into helping human resources, reviewing applications for police officers, for dispatchers, making sure that the applications are properly completed. We've reached out, contacted multiple applicants, and that's a process that we have to go through because we are not fortunate enough to have a huge pool of individuals that are going to apply for a police officer and actually make it through the application process. And the same thing applies for dispatcher. But we've cut that debt back, and the impact will be that we will be doing less. And that correlates exactly with the police officer defunding and the defunding of the dispatchers. We'll have less to do, but we're still going to have some to do because we've got other officers leaving, et cetera. That just comes with the territory. Having said that, we'll move right up to the top. We're going to defund one police officer position. We're currently staffed at 82. We reached that number of 82 back in March of 2018. When we came to council in regards to, it began as a crisis for us because of the pay for officers. We were losing officers left and right to other areas. I had been bringing that to the attention, or attempted to bring it to the attention of our council on numerous occasions. And that turned into come up with a recruitment and hiring strategy, retention strategy. So out of that, I presented to this council, not these members here, but Mayor Bluback, you'll remember, our retention and recruitment strategy, and also came up with a 9-year plan to staff the police department, because we had under policy goals and implementations, that was back in 2015, to hire get us up to 1.5 officers per 1,000. Well, that meant 36 officers. Nothing was done to plan for that. No monies were provided. No direction was provided. So I came forth in March of 2018 with a 9-year plan. Out of that 9-year plan, it was 18 officers and 9 support staff in 9 years. Council chose to pre-fund 2 years in advance, which got us 4 officers and 2 dispatchers. So it took us from 78 to 82, and dispatchers from 14, where we were always at, to 16. I just wanted you to be clear on that. And Mayor, you'll recall, you asked me, are you going to be able to hire those 4 officers? July 1, I will have hired those 4 officers, and I told you probably not in a year. We're beyond a year. But July 1, they will be hired to go into the police academy. They won't be operational, but we will be hiring. But we'll defund 1, so that puts us at 81. That defunding of 1 impacts our neighborhood resource officer program. It requires 4 to go into that program. It's besides patrol, so we won't be staffing that program. And that means correlating impact to our transient issues, our homelessness issues, mental health issues that we're dealing with out on the street that you're all getting phone calls on. So that will be impactful there. 3 dispatch positions. I have 5 positions currently open. Defunding 3 will give me 2 positions open. My dispatch, the correlating impact there will be in dispatch services. We're a public safety access point for 911 calls. So we'll be reevaluating how we dispatch services. We're already in the process of changing our priorities, i.e. life and death obviously is a priority 1, threat to life, threat to property. But we're going to reevaluate our priority 3s, 4s. We are looking at changing up how we're going to be doing dispatching services, not only for police, but fire. A lot of times our dispatchers are conducting services for the police officers and the firefighters while they're out on the scene, calling, et cetera. That's going to be changing because now I will be at 2 dispatchers if I'm lucky in dispatch, and they work 12 hours on, 12 hours off. So that will be a big impact, and the bigger impact is when you have a pool of employees at 16, where we were, and you drop us to 14, this is one of those positions, like police officers. If you can ever get fully staffed at that number, then those bodies assist you in your 3rd position, and they assist you with those days off and so forth. If you have someone go out on maternity leave, or you have someone that breaks his leg, that pool that you have to draw from will assist you in filling that. It's overtime fill, but it'll assist you in filling that. I don't have that luxury now. Even if we didn't fund these 3, I don't have that luxury because we're so understaffed there. We're just trying to get good dispatchers, and it's very difficult. So it is an impact that we will deal with. Moving, you have any questions? Okay.
Yes, hold on.
Yes, Chief, I had a quick question. Backing up to the background investigations, could you explain that a little bit more? When you do background investigations on the officers or everybody that's coming in for a job, correct?
Yes.
Now, who pays, does the city pay for those? Or, 'cause the reason I'm asking, let me tell you, as a notary, I had to get background check, I had to pay for it. As a tax preparer, I had to get a background check, I had to pay for that. So I'm just wondering, who's paying for the background checks? Are we charging the individuals, or is the city paying for the background checks?
Background checks, on the average, for a police officer, firefighter, were $1,500. They're about $1,700 now. That's for a 40-hour background. It's general fund. It's Turlock Police Department. It's funded through the general fund. So if I'm budgeted $55,000, that's why I'm at $125,000, because we've overspent because I'm not getting money from other departments. And frankly, that's one of the changes that we will be making. That budget of $54,000 or $55,000 for my background investigators, that is going to be only for the police department. I won't exceed that. If I get to the point where it's close to exceed, we won't hire anyone that needs a background for the police department. If another department needs it, they'll have to provide me a line account for it. That's what's going to happen. Does that answer your question, Councilmember?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we're paid for, my point was that most people, when they're going,
Yeah.
applying for a job or whatever, they have to get a background investigation. They pay for it themselves as part of the application. And so that's why I was just curious as to.
We don't, oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Do we charge the applicant?
Exactly.
No.
So that's.
We wouldn't get an applicant.
Right, no.
We're already fighting against pay and other things going on with police and dispatch.
Mr. Locke?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Just quickly, because we're on this subject, Chief, could you just give us a very brief, discuss briefly the difference between a law enforcement background examination and one that might be conducted under other circumstances for other occupations? Say, example, for a notary, it's not just a name check and a fingerprint check.
DOJ.
Right, so Department of Justice, Peace Officer Standards and Training, California Penal Code, and several government codes require certain levels of investigations for police officers and firefighters also. So that level of investigation includes not only getting fingerprinted and checking you throughout the nation and Interpol. We also check abroad. We also go back to your kindergarten, preschool days, if we can trace that back. That means travel. For anyone else, such as what you described, we wouldn't do anything like that. But if we were, I would believe all they would do would be a credit history check, a Google check, Transamerica, and that's it. Because they don't have access to check your criminal history for hiring purposes. And Mr. White could confirm that with me, but the private sector can't do that. The public sector, for law enforcement and fire, we do that. So hopefully I answered that, boss.
Vic?
So are you doing that for other departments as well, and then they reimburse you, or is it just a police line item?
That's my line item.
That's not
And
fire,
we-
that's not
No.
HR or anything, that's just for your
Yes.
people? Okay.
And, for instance, we did the one for the city manager. So it comes out of the police line.
So Bob, you owe them $1,700.
Actually, his was a little bit,
But in exchange, they got my third grade report cards, so it's a fair trade.
they didn't print on paper back then. Okay. So we talked about defunding the police officer and dispatcher. We move on down to the police officer hold vacant until October. We have a police officer resignation, not going to another agency. She's giving up the profession. That's sad. She's a very good officer. But those are additional savings we will have in holding that position vacant for a couple months. I will tell you in all reality that I haven't gotten to, but we just talked about background, but I haven't gotten to everything else we've done in that miscellaneous area. We cut our recruitment processes out. We cut our advertising processes out. We shut the applications down. We're no longer helping HR. So that whole system of going out, finding cops, finding dispatchers is shut down. So in order to even consider getting that person to fill that position, I'm about 18 months out if I were to start right now. And that's best case scenario. No different than when you asked, will I hire those 4 cops? I said at least a year or a year and a half. So I just want you to be clear, that's $34,000 there. But more than likely, we will have added salary savings that will come that way. Not because I want to, that's just the way it's going to work. The next position for $72,890, we have a lieutenant retiring in November. We've known it, and yes, we budgeted for it, just to make sure everybody knows. But we're holding that police officer's position because it's a domino effect, right? Lieutenant retires, you have to promote a lieutenant. That means you promote a sergeant. Then you have to promote a sergeant. That means you promote an officer. I have to hire an officer before any of that can happen. We'll be, hopefully by the end of January, I'll be able to still promote, but we're not going to hire that officer again until fiscal year ending next year. But hopefully, that officer will get hired probably about October of 2020. So that's how far out I'm already planning. The correlating impacts for all of these are your neighborhood resource officer program, the ability to staff our minimum staffing on the streets right now are 5-day shift, 5 swing shift, 4 nighttime. Minimum staffing. If it falls below that, we mandate officers. We're currently running 6, 5, and 4, meaning 6 days, 5, and 4. So I'm mandating every other day just about, overtime. So that's how we're filling that. So while we defund positions, the minimum service still has to be held. I have no choice there. We're a little bit different than fire, so please don't confuse us. We still are going to have officers out there, but the manner in which that minimum work has to be done, this is how we have to do it. Any questions on the staff reductions? One thing I didn't cover was the accounts clerk. We had $78,000 set aside. We had that money available. We were going to hire an accounts clerk to assist our business analyst. All of these figures that I have brought forth, it's been through our business analyst. On top of everything else she does payroll. This accounts clerk was going to help with the payroll functions, with the purchase orders, with the inputting data and so forth. That is now not going to happen, so that's where the $78,000. It puts more of pressure on our business analyst supervisor, but with the help of the captains, we've picked up some of the slack to assist with that. Any questions regarding staff reductions, correlating impacts?
Yes, Councilmember Larson.
Yes, ma'am.
Just really quick, I might have missed it. So with these the staffing reduction, what's the ratio for officers per citizen? Is it still 1.5 per 1,000?
Oh, no, we're not.
No, not close to that. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Okay.
So I tried to give you the start numbers. So in 2008, we were 1.11, and we had a population of 70,000, about 70,150. So that comes to 1.11. Our current population, I know I wrote it, yeah, 74,730, with 82 funded positions gives us 1.09, because your population went up, right? So when you defund, you're actually taking me to 81 with a clear defunding. 2 more is 80, 1 more is 79. So just quick math, if you divide 74,730 by 79, 1.06. So we're going down. Hopefully that, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Captain, yell at me if I forget. Both captains yell at me. We're a team, so. The next one, proposed reductions. The overtime. The police department plans its overtime. We have court overtime. We have fair overtime. We have detectives overtime. We have our records overtime. We have our administrative overtime. We've planned, budgeted for those overtimes, and it's because of events and programs that we conduct in those areas. Detectives overtime is not in here, because detectives overtime can easily exceed, I believe it's $130,000 when we have incidents occur. This fiscal year, we've had 9 homicides. I'm happy to say we've identified, solved. Every single one has either been an arrest or we have people identified for it. So, and that comes through overtime. We've had detectives work 28 hours straight. That's working 28 hours straight following leads. So while we program those overtimes, this overtime reduction is specifically from, as it indicates there, is 250. We reduced our field operations to $250,000. That's the same amount of money we've had for the last 10 years. In my time being at Turlock Police Department, from police officer through, we've always exceeded it. It's always been put at $250,000. And that's something that has put, the city manager agrees with me, that's ridiculous. Why do we do that? That's just what was done. We budgeted this year, I believe, $550,000 just for field operations. And I have all my overtime broken down, so I'll be happy to share it with you. We reduced our budget back to $250,000. And what this chart shows you, I wanted you guys to be very clear what this means. We just talked about reducing officers and reducing so forth, a lot of other things. What you see here is $78 an hour covers the average cost of a police officer. Like fire, police officers start at different steps. And we also have sergeants involved in there. So we have to average it. And our business analysts working with finance, we came up with that $78. It increased over The last time we did it was $70. So there's a cost of doing business, right? If you take that amount of $250,000 divided by 365 days and divided by that hourly rate of $78, you come up approximately 9 hours a day, every day available. My shifts for patrol staff, again, we talked about minimum staffing. 554, if it drops below that, we have to order people in. The shifts are 11-hour shifts, minimally. I've already exceeded that. So just keep that in your head right now, and we'll get to the point I'm going to try to make. Our original request, as you see, was $525,000, but that was with full staffing of 82. Because I spoke about programs and I spoke about events, and I gave you the definition of that. And just keep that in your head for now. Any questions on this slide? Communications. Our current overtime we propose is $70,000. Again, we took it back to where we were at. If we were fully staffed in communications, we'd be close here. We'd be close because we wouldn't be dealing with mandatory overtime, no sick or no lunches, etc. However, doing the math again with $55 as the average per hour, you do the math, that's 3.5 hours a day available. Right now, my dispatch center has 9 dispatchers. 1 is going out on maternity leave. 1 just resigned. Drops me to 7. I have 1 in training. That'll take me back up to 8 in July. I have 3 in backgrounds. They made it to backgrounds. I was just informed today 1 failed. I'm at 2 now with 1 going for the psychological testing. As you can see, as you lower my pool of employees, and these things happen where you have resignations, etc., it has a correlating impact in the ability to staff properly. The PSAP must be staffed in order to have it, right? You can't run an emergency communications center with insufficient staffing. You can't do it, it's illegal. Well, you have to either shut it down and move to the county, or that's about all we can do. So this 3.5 hours a day, per the MOU, they get an hour lunch. I don't think that's asking too much for a 12-hour shift. They don't get it, so we have to pay them overtime. I'm going to burn through this. No ins after, there's no way I'm not going to burn through it. That's in our budget reduction proposal. So this sounds bleak. I ask you to look at the impacts for our overtime, and here's where I wanted you guys to look at. You saw my 2018 annual report. I hope all of you had a chance to look through it. I went through it kind of fast. But all of the programs we do there, the National Night Out, the Every 15 Minutes, the Community Academy, the Community Assistance Response and Engagement, that's huge. That's my care team. Councilmember Larson and Nazarati, you both came to the police department, we explained that to you. We funded officers to have specialized training for that, but we do it on overtime, and they work in conjunction with Stan Behavioral Health, our mental health facility, behavioral, I forgot what the name is, the paramedic unit. We work together with them, and we go out. We were going out 4 times a month. We cut it back to 2. That's gone because it was all done on overtime. Monte Vista Crossings holiday patrols, downtown holiday patrols. So the Black Friday from that week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we funded overtime to do that. We were able to drop Monte Vista Crossings in the first year 24% crime rate. That was the first year. That was the first year I was chief. That's gone. Open house, we just had our last one. That cost me $10,000 to run on overtime because, even though the officers and the support staff would probably do it for free, it's illegal. Can't do it for free. So I want you to know all those programs, Kettle Dash shouldn't be in a program. That's actually an event. Those are necessary, but they're all funded through overtime. We're not a huge agency, but that's how we do it. So we move to operational necessities. I already spoke about that. I have to maintain patrol minimums. Have to. I'm morally and ethically and legally obligated to do that. I can't run a city with 3 cops at night. Number one, going to get a police officer killed. And number two, majority of our calls are 2-officer responses. That's the way our society has gone. I can't control that. But what I can control is the safety of our police officers. We will maintain the minimums, and we have to do it through overtime. Dispatch, same thing. We move into injury, backfill, holdover, et cetera. A lot of people don't understand when an officer works 11 hours, his shift is 11 hours, it doesn't end at 11 hours. It's going to end at 12 hours. Because by the time they get into the station from the last call, they have to write any in-custody reports. It's required. The judges require that an in-custody juvenile is written within 24 hours. Well, if you work swings, that means you got to stay and write it. Adults have to have the reports to them within 48 hours. So there's no time to sit and not write the report. So we try to manage that, and the sergeants have been doing very well. Stop, write your reports. But remember, for every hour a police officer works, police officer standing in training, break it down to 20 minutes, should be responding to the call, dealing with the call. Another 20 minutes should be in writing the report. And the final 20 minutes is available time. That's where they do your traffic stops, contact suspicious persons, or out in your neighborhoods, etc. I know I've gone over my 15 minutes. You're giving me the eye. But you need to know that. And also, we have critical incident callouts. Our MATE team, Major Accident Investigation Team, those are specially trained police officers that have gone to hundreds of hours of investigations for collisions. The most recent horrific one, 2 of them. We had the one at Monte Vista in Gear where the gentleman DUI hit the vehicle, had 100 plus miles an hour and killed the girl in the back. That took us almost 4 days worth of overtime to complete that investigation. The other one with the 2 small children at Fulkerth, where they're paraplegic. That took us like 3 solid days, and I'm talking overtime. It was longer than that, it was weeks. That person was convicted because we had a major accident investigation team. We don't have to have that. We don't have to spend that money. We can call Highway Patrol and wait for them to come if they will. Otherwise, we just take a normal accident. But those horrific scenes like that, that individual would have walked away if we didn't have a MATE team. The individual that killed that girl, he would have walked away with a DUI and the DA would have pled it down to a reckless driving. So it's important that you understand the difference between them. Our SWAT team, same thing. Those are the correlating impacts. So here's the current proposal. The current proposal is $1.8 million. I've already covered it. Staff reductions, equipment, vehicle deferrals, maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. It's all there for you. Recommended option, I'm recommending this option. The first one is, no disrespect, city manager, that's your job, and I get it. But for me, I am recommending that you do this option, not the 1.8 million. I'm recommending that you choose to fund overtime by $400,000, specifically $300,000 to the standard overtime for police officers and $100,000 to dispatch. This will allow us to maintain the minimum staffing that we need to keep in patrol, accompanied with your reductions. I do understand that the city is in trouble. I do understand that every one of my directors here and every one of the other employees that work here, we work together. I get that, and I am a team player, but it's my responsibility, again, to present to you options. The first option is a balanced budget. Those are the correlating impacts. Option 2, which is my recommendation, is you deficit spend or you pull from the general fund reserve $400,000 to fund the overtime. And I can break my overtime down for you. I have a chart here already for you. So with that, we do have our overtime separated in regards to what's necessary and what's not and what's billable. We are now, just so you know, we won't conduct event overtimes without billing the events. We won't do it. So with that, I'm up here ready for you.
Becky?
Is there any way, so like the DUI crash that happened on Gear and Monte Vista, that we can bill the insurance companies for that extra time?
Yeah, I don't know about the insurance companies, but we do cost recovery under the DUI bill for the amount of hours we spend out there for the actual response, emergency response. That's what we're allowed to do.
Is
I
that
believe
from the
this.
state or the feds?
Pardon?
The state or the federal? I mean,
For,
cost recovery, is that from the state?
it's a
Like-
civil procedure that we
Oh, okay.
actually bill the individual, and it goes through the court systems. If they're found guilty, the court orders them to pay it. I try to keep track of it. Finance is assisting me. We get a certain amount, but the rest of it goes to collections.
Which that never results in
No.
dollars.
But-
So the insurance companies would be, more,
The insurance company wouldn't pay for the police services, they would pay for the victim that's impacted by their client's actions. I would assume. I'm not, Mr. White, am I correct?
just a thought.
Yeah, no, it's a good thought, I'd love to bill them.
Other questions?
Quick, just tossing stuff out.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I know that a lot of the traffic enforcement, stuff like that, most of the money goes to the county court system. Is there anything that we can do as a city, as far as ordinances or anything, to raise fees or something to recoup some of that money, or more money, bigger fees? I'm looking for ways to make money here.
And I appreciate that. Unfortunately, issuing traffic citations is not a moneymaker. As you already alluded to, a very small amount, and I used to have the formula broken down, but between the state, the county, the courts, the district attorney, the probation department, we get something like, I want to say, maybe I'm wrong, but about 13 cents on the dollar. So the enforcement actions come as a result of the lack of people following our educational outreach to them. You see our electronic signs. We do try to, the whole idea of traffic citations is to reduce our collisions. By the way, we are doing a pretty good job just with 2 and a supervisor, but there's no money in that. Under the Turlock Municipal Code, you can do parking citations, and we do have revenue coming in from the parking citations. But just a couple of years ago, we had to change that because we found out from the state that we had to make sure we sent the state their fair share. So, yeah. So the bottom line is revenue generated from those individuals who choose to violate the law, whether it's traffic or parking, is insufficient to really address some of these issues. You're going to have to find another revenue source, and 2 of the council members alluded to it last meeting. You've got to find another revenue source, and I know the mayor is working on a plan, and I appreciate that, to increase current revenue ratios, and that's awesome. But the bottom line is the city has not done anything in regards to increasing its revenues while it continues to grow and the cost of doing business continues. So, sorry.
Councilman?
I know one of the recommendations, or on the line item, we had parking enforcement, an increase there. Is that with the existing personnel is going to be delegated to do some parking enforcement? Because I don't think we've had any revenue in years past in that area.
We have had revenues in parking enforcement, and we are asking our community service officers who take reports that don't involve suspects to continue to provide those parking citations. That's why you'll see in the miscellaneous section, I revised the revenues because I was trying to be as prudent as possible in it, but currently our revenues are already exceeding what we said last year. So that's why I raised the revenue amount that you saw on the chart. So we are looking at those revenues, but again, you're looking at about $65,000 in parking revenues. There's other ways to increase revenues. You can put meters, in the parking spots downtown. That was discussed on tons of time because we have the businesses down there complaining that, they don't have a spot for their customers because employees of other businesses are parking there. So it is a revenue, and we're doing the best we can with it. But when we pull staffing, it has a correlating impact in the ability to do that because your available time even for the police officers drop. But it's not something we're not doing. We're trying to pull every every penny we can out of that. And if you look at that miscellaneous revenues, you'll also see an increase in animal services. Animal services is a revenue producer because we have licensing issues, and the idea of licensing is to ensure you're spading, neutering your animals, and that you're giving them their rabies shots. And we also couple that with grants to help people pay that can't pay for those things. But you'll see that our revenue I also increased our revenue line in regards to animal services. So we're we're squeezing everywhere we can.
Okay, I'll open it to the public. Anyone wishing to speak in regard to police services, or actually police and dispatch services, that's what, and animal services?
Police department.
Okay, I guess we'll close that and bring it back. Anything you want to say in regard to this?
Thank you for the invitation, Madam Mayor, and I'll do my best to be brief. I want to thank today, the Public Safety Department heads and their staffs for their contributions to this budget, even though they are not necessarily contributions that they themselves would endorse or choose. They've been very supportive of my efforts to present a balanced budget here. A couple of points. What we have presented over the last 2 weeks is not a new way for the city of Turlock to do business. It is a way for us to organize our work and gain the time necessary during the forthcoming year to look at some maybe fundamental, maybe some experimental, but definitely some interesting changes. I had the pleasure of working many years ago with an outstanding county sheriff, and when he was presented with a fiscal situation much like the one that we have and had to make significant reductions in jail, road patrol, and administrative operations, his comment to the press was, well, of course nobody's very happy about this, but it did force us to find some new ways to do things. And I think that's what we're going to be looking at over the next year. I want to remind members of this council and the residents of our city that this budget for this year and maybe for the next year, your city staff will be doing less with less. We have pushed the envelope at doing more with less and better with less. But the comments you've heard from our department heads over the last 2 sessions here, they've been pretty clear, they've been unambiguous that these resource constraints will require reductions in service level. And they've tried their best to explain where that's going to take place. And these are not devices, these are not ways to draw attention to anything. This is what we have the capability of doing. And so we will work beginning July 1st toward what the new Turlock will look like, what our organization is going to be, what our priorities are going to be, and how we're going to meet them. It is, as always, our responsibility to demonstrate to the public that their tax dollars are used wisely and for purposes which are consistent with their intent as represented on this council. So I'd like to thank again the department heads. I'd like to thank the residents who have come to these meetings and participated, and all of us on the staff are ready to move forward at council's direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, closed session was already reported out, so adjournment. We got a motion and a second. All in favor? Say aye. Meeting's ended.
And maybe just for the public, this was a special meeting. The regular meeting is still happening tonight at 6 o'clock.